much. The Inside Edge has a special place in my life because when I launched Inspired Work in 1990, that very same week, someone came to me and said, you have to join this crazy group that gets together in Beverly Hills. And through that group, I met mentors like Jack Canfield, Boyd Willett. I became a very close friend of Emily, Emily Coleman, who goes back, who in the middle of one of our seminars with the bank stood up and gave people tips on how to accessorize for Newton Counter Group. Yeah.
Michael Coleman is right.
Did he? Hi, Michael. So in the 25 years that I've been in this work called Inspired Work, a great deal of change has taken place. In 1990, I realized that work for most of us is the biggest relationship that we have. And yet, the Industrial Revolution, our parents conditioned us not to look for work as a relationship or fulfillment or joy. We were conditioned to seek predictability and survival. Don't do that. That's a stupid idea. Go get a real job. Go get a degree. This is what we were taught during the Industrial Revolution. The rate of change between 1990 and today is head spinning. When we started the business, it's based on a 2-day program that a little over 42,000 people have participated in. And the Inspired Work program takes a model of what it looks like to have a great relationship towards work, and we personalize that experience through Socratic questions. And through answering these questions, thousands of people have changed their lives. They've started new careers, they've launched businesses, they've gone back to companies where they really felt they had to resign and leave because something had poisoned the well, only to go back and end up running the company. In this work, when we look at work as a relationship, it becomes much bigger than just selecting a vocation. And in the early days, we were very lucky to have a large bank that change has removed from our community. First Interstate Bank became one of our first clients. And they were going through, they were starting to fall apart. And we took thousands of people through the program. And these individuals we had a gentleman named John Morgan who came through the program terrified about his future. He'd been a marketing executive with the bank for 25 years. He came with his blue suit and stick pin. And you recognize that one? You had it? So he stood up on the first day and expressed this terror of being middle-aged and having to find a job when he was going through the shock of having a job for life. That was the big topic at what I feel is one of the big turning points with work. In 1990, we were starting to tear apart the job for life. He came into the program on the second day and stood up and made an announcement that he'd been in love with the art world his entire life. And he made this commitment that he was going to devote the rest of his professional life to the art world. 3 years ago, I was pedaling the bike at the gym, reading the Times. I turned the page, and it said, John Morgan, leader in the Los Angeles art community, was his obituary. And he started a children's charity that is now run by the Getty Trust. He launched a gallery, and at the end of the story, it said, Mr. Morgan was previously in the banking industry. These are the kinds of stories. We have thousands of these stories today, but it's the power of what we've been doing. But what I've observed around the world of change is kind of hair-raising. Because back in 1990, people would go through these kind of convulsive changes, like changing their careers, and they would come to me and they'd say, well, I'm really glad that's over. And something inside of me, I just had this premonition that the rate of change was only beginning. When I was 17 years old, Alvin Toffler wrote a book called Future Shock. And in it, he predicted a world where technology would speed up the rate of change more every day, and that by the turn of the century, most people would be in a perpetual state of shock. And we see that today. I'll just give you a few examples. You're talking about employee engagement. Employee engagement is one of the most costly problems in companies today, and Gallup recently completed its annual global engagement survey, which indicates that only 13% of the world's workers are disengaged, are engaged. It means that 87% of our workers aren't there. And all of us can see it when we call a service center to solve a problem, or go into a store and try to get someone's attention, right? We just dropped out of a gym recently because while we were checking in, the person at the front desk wouldn't look up because she was busy texting. We see this everywhere that we go. So engagement on a business level is a huge problem, but most engagement programs in companies fail because they use old solutions. Like they'll take engagement surveys or employee surveys that we designed back in the 90s, and all that does is tell management what's wrong with them. Doesn't produce any kind of engagement. So the more that we study the engagement problem, the more we realize is people don't engage because they can't change, or they're terrified of change, or they don't believe that they can change. And change actually has a set of required skills attached to it. But just to look at a little bit more of the problem, right now, what's the number one job in this country for men? Truckers. Truckers is the number one job in this country for men. And today, as we sit here, Daimler has several hundred trucks in the state of Nevada that are driving around with no one in the truck. Okay? We have, this last week I had a physical, and I went to Quest Diagnostics to have my blood drawn, and I was talking to the staff and I was asking them what they thought of Theranos. Theranos is this new revolutionary blood testing process where you take a little tiny prick on your finger at the pharmacy, and they can run virtually every test off of that minute sample at maybe 1/10 the price of what you pay in traditional testing. This one innovation produced the youngest female billionaire in the world, okay? And it also is going to end the diagnostic laboratory industry as we know it. So I'm asking these people, what do you think of Theranos? And they didn't know who they were. And then the guy that was drawing my blood came to me and he said, someone came in here last week from the company and it sounded like they were having a nervous breakdown about this topic. I said, all of you ought to be out there re-educating yourselves, finding new ways to work, to take what you love and to redeploy it, which is the game today. But the way most of us were conditioned was to look at change as a threat to our security, as a threat to our predictability. And what do we do with that? We use our unhealthy relationship with fear to kill it on the spot. One of my friends is Kathy Sandine, who is now the chancellor of University of Wisconsin. For the last 10 years, she's been conducting studies on the accelerating change and how that's impacting education. And one of my favorite statistics from her is that the average college graduate today is going to change their careers. Not their jobs, but their careers 4 to 6 times. Jeff knows that very well, who is one of these younger entrepreneurs who fluidly reinvents himself over and over. I think, Diana, you're another one of those great examples. When Toffler talked about future shock and when he expressed what we really need to do to be successful in this new world, he said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And unlearning is the frightening part of it. I was a concert pianist. I studied music at USC. And after staying up all night listening to Herbie Hancock's Lincoln Center concert, I went into Daniel Pollack, my teacher at USC, and announced that I wanted his job, Herbie Hancock's job. And he almost threw me out of the studio, but eventually I found a great teacher to work with me on jazz. And when I sat down with him, he had me play, and then he said to me, "You studied with Pollack, right? You sat on the floor playing Russian exercise backwards and forwards." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You need an emotional enema if you're if you ever hope to play one living note of music, you're going to have to forget everything you've been taught." And that was such a terrifying moment for me. I still remember it vividly today. And was one of the most valuable life experiences I ever had. What do we do when we don't want to change? In our culture, we get conditioned from the moment we're born to kill off change. Our parents teach us, our friends teach us, our culture teaches us, and we take our fear, we put on a pair of sunglasses called a filter. So if we're looking out through a blue lens for 20 years, we might swear the world is blue, and it's not true. But we use these filters to kill off change on the spot. And we use these, all of this dialogue that I'm giving you today, we use it in our Inspired Work program for individuals who want to change their lives or reinvent themselves. But we also use these in our leadership programs. We started our leadership programs at the Walt Disney Company right after 9/11. So Walt Disney had gone from being a very abundant environment to one where we had park attendants falling off terribly, and we had people weren't buying princess dolls and going to the movies, and so we had to become really innovative. And I told the leaders, when you walk in with this initiative you've crafted with us, you have to be prepared for this. So the most common filter that we use to kill off change is cynicism. It's like walking into Quest Diagnostics and bringing up Theranos. Who's that? That's your old job burning over the horizon. It's the truth. But we shield ourselves from that by knitting away with it, that inner dialogue that talks us out of it before we even move forward. It's like creative thinking. Creative thinking and creativity have nothing in common. Real creativity requires action. Action introduces risk. Creative thinking, Arietti said that the world's mental institutions are filled with creative thinkers. Okay? So we kill off the mere thought of change like that. We have another filter. This is the filter that I call the assassination filter. If someone gets really frightened, they distill their cynicism into contempt. And contempt is that emotionally violent reaction that kills the idea, kills the thought on the spot. It's over and done with. I'm showing you these filters because once we show the steps of change, you'll probably recognize a little bit how all of us are so gifted at stopping the whole thing. The next filter that we use is what I call life without vision. These are the people clocking in, clocking out, not thinking, not looking at what their best and highest use is. It's life without vision, and we settle into the trance. We go through the motions. And very often, it's really quite comfortable. It's like going on a cruise and having all of your needs taken care of. It's like we know where we belong. We know when we're expected. But on the horizon, again, is that we have this great change taking place. Circling back to the predictability, survival predictability thing that we live with for so many years, what do you think the new opportunity is with the modern world? Almost diametrically opposed to what we were conditioned to do. The new opportunity is growth. We live in a world today where if we want to grow, we have so much information available to us that we can grow on the spot. We have so many opportunities to try new things, to learn new information, to adopt new behavior, to become someone else. And I believe people today reincarnate in their own skin, at least the ones who are motivated to change and grow, and as Toffler said, unlearn. So aimlessness is that kind of thing that we just go through every day. And the next one is resignation, the why bother filter. I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm too young, I don't have the right degree. Okay, why bother? When I was in New York, I was giving a speech at Time Warner. And this is maybe 8 years ago because the new phenomenon hit me on the streets. We were walking about 6 blocks to get to the center, and I had all of these mad-looking people walking towards me, not looking where they were walking, barking into the air like crazy people. And I was asking the person I was with, what the bleep are they doing? And they're talking on their phones, and they're not looking where they're going. And it was just, so during the question and answer period at Time Warner, an HBO executive raised his hand. He said, what's the biggest obstacle people have right now in building a great relationship with their work? I said, frenzy. And that's the new one. We had these first 4 filters for 20 years. A few years ago, we added frenzy to it because that is the new trance. We get caught up with all the things we have to do, all the places we have to be, all the emails we have to respond to, all the texts that we're looking at, getting through the store, shopping, getting the kids through school, spending on average in this country an hour and a half getting to work, which considering the technology opportunities that we have today is crazy. Kim runs a company that's filled with hundreds of professionals, and they have no offices. And they have one of the healthiest, most dynamic cultures I've ever encountered. So that is like the new world today. But we do what we've been told to do, we're doing what we're conditioned to do, and when it's time to change, the biggest fear is changing ourselves. You brought that up at the table. Self-change is the biggest challenge of all. But self-change has to occur if we're not going to have change happen to us. And I've been part of so many environments where change happens to people in the most untoward of ways, the most humiliating ways, where people no longer are able to make a good living, where people are no longer happy, where people no longer have a place because they are so afraid and unskilled in changing themselves. And, you know, to be a little compassionate about it, consider the alcoholic. Becoming a sober, healthy, effective individual is a terrifying process for these individuals, and I think we can actually examine many of the the turning points that they have to go through to be successful with that. About 3 years into the Inspired Work program, we were at a big hotel in Los Angeles. We had 100 people in the room. We walked out the door with my team. I think Emily was there. And I turned to everybody and I said, I just got it. I just saw what is in the way of why people have such challenges with changing their lives. And what had happened for me, I'd heard the dialogues of so many people from virtually every walk of life talking about what the navigation process looked like for them. And so in it, I developed what was a big part of my first book, The Truth About Work, all the reasons we ought to be afraid of change. Because there are very legitimate reasons to go there. So on your handout this morning, you'll find at the second half of the page, there is a chart. There's a gray shading on it. And at the bottom, it says choice, and at the top, it says success. And we found in our environment that when people make a decision to change their lives, there are 5 steps that take place, and each step is typically more frightening than the one before it. And remember, if it becomes more frightening, the probability that we're going to go back to the cynicism, contempt, aimlessness, resignation, and frenzy filters gets bigger. So we want to be aware of how we might shoot ourselves in the foot as we move forward. So just to keep it really simple, we make a choice, something that we're going to do with our lives. And at a subliminal level, we probably already know that that journey could become a little thorny. So in our culture, we've been given a way out, a way to not ever step onto that road, a way to not even address it, a way to stay off the journey. It's 3 magic words. What do you think they are? What do you want to do with your life, Dave? I don't know. Wasn't that easy? We didn't have to go digging for that one. I don't know. Now remember, our business is Socratic. We find that everybody has their truth. Most people are distracted from their truth, and many of them have been distracted for a long time, okay? But we have people that come into our program. Every program, someone says, you know what, I'll be the one person who doesn't get it. I'll be the one person who doesn't come out of here with clarity. And by lunchtime, they're yammering away about their new mission, vision, and purpose, and it's because the truth is right there below the surface for all of us. And the one suggestion we give in terms of narrative in our programs is to give up the 3 words, I don't know, because so many of us have sought solace and protection in those 3 words for decades. It keeps us out of any kind of discomfort. And change and growth is uncomfortable. There's a human potential leader, I think his name begins with Werner. I did S the weekend of the Jim Jones massacre, so that was back when it was like dangerous to go. And I had so much fun. I mean, the cursing and swearing in that room and the putting people down, I didn't know it at the time, but I was a budding human potential leader because I wasn't offended. I was interested. I really wanted to see how these people would respond to that. It was so just fascinating to me, like such crude stuff. But he talked about growth, that many people would like growth to be like floating in a pool of tepid water. And I just find that growth doesn't work that way. That we crack skin, we get awkward, we go through all kinds of changes as we grow into that new person. So, choice We give up those 3 words. But then we have to, you already saw it. If we're going to move out forward with our mission, vision, and purpose, do we have to tell anybody? We've already told ourselves. Do we have to tell anybody? Nothing of value happens in this world without collaboration. Think about it for a moment. None of us would be here without collaboration. Everything that gets done in this world requires collaboration. So if we're going to make it real, we have to tell somebody. Who do we usually tell first? Friends? Spouse? Co-workers? Hairdresser. This is the hairdresser table. You ought to write a book. We tell members of our tribe. We tell members of our tribe. Now picture this. Do tribes have rigid rituals and expectations? So we come home and we tell our spouse, you know what? I'm having a great experience at this program. I'm going to start my own business. In fact, I'm going to start something that's altruistic. How does the spouse respond? We had a program that out of 100 people, it turned out there were about 3 dozen Jewish male professionals who got together over lunch. And they came back from lunch with the Jewish mother's hierarchy of acceptable career choices. It's all based on how the other mother's eyebrows responded when she said what her husband did for a living. So Mount Rise of the eyebrow was CPA, halfway up the forehead, attorney to the hairline, doctor, specially provoked a natural facelift. So you take one of those guys, this is a real story, who goes home at the Thanksgiving dinner the next month and announces he's becoming a florist. What happens? Sobbing, running around, makeup running. What are you doing? This is insane. And tribes are won over. We don't have time to go into a lot of this in depth, but tribes are won over by what's in it for them. Human beings are hardwired to be able to think of something other than themselves a maximum of 15 seconds. This is biological fact. So you don't go into your tribe and get righteous and say, you're supposed to support me. You go in and you tell them what's in it for them, and you work from that angle because they'll be more likely to connect with it. I'm tired of making the family miserable with my misery. Now, I want to come to the family and bring life to it. We talk in terminology like that, and they're more apt to listen. Okay? We're only at step 2, and we can already see there's some fear involved. What comes next? For many, this is the terror step. And remember, all of this can be mastered with building skills to deal with it. It's all learnable. But the next one, why people are so frightened of it, is if we're going to move forward, we have to draw healthy attention to ourselves. You know this. I know you've been making a living off of this one for many years. Mastery. I copped such a big resentment with her. She told me the amount of her first commission check from Health Communications, and it was bigger than mine. I did. So, drawing attention to ourselves in our culture is problematic because, for example, the American family, the family used to be the laboratory to create that kind of skill. But the average family today communicates 7 minutes, 4 of those minutes is spent arguing, and then they go to watch television for an average of 4 hours, and God knows how long on the internet. So the modern family is no longer the laboratory to teach us how to draw attention to ourselves. Healthy attention. And in this area, many of the people that we work with, when they start to really look at what they want to accomplish with their lives, we start encouraging them to take sales training, to take presentation skills training, join Toastmasters, start hanging out with mentors who know how to do this effectively, because those of us who don't know how to do this effectively sit on the sidelines in many different ways. And learning how to do it opens up all kinds of new doors that we never dreamed of. Okay? This is why it can be scary. I did a lot of radio, and my first radio appearance was with Rick Dees on KISS FM. And I drove back to Century City, and I'm like full of myself, like, boy, I really nailed that, and wow, I'm going to be a superstar in radio. And I come into my office, and there's a red light on my telephone, and I go, messages. All of my friends calling to tell me how great I was. And the first message was from some guy from, I won't name the city, but I think they're the meth capital of the valley. Threatening my life. He'd bothered to get my phone number, my location, and he'd gone through a receptionist and left this threat on my my telephone. And my business manager was the next message. I called him. He won't believe what just happened. I told him. He said, well, now that you're getting public with all of this, we need to start building more protection around you. Up until that point, I hadn't thought of that. And when we talk about drawing healthy attention to ourselves, it isn't just about becoming a salesperson or learning social networking. It's about really understanding how to manage the consequences of attention as well. I'm going to give you the last step and then open this up for questions, because I think all of us will get more out of this if we talk about any issues you'd like to have answered. So we'll just go straight to the next one, which I find for most people is the biggest. Preface it with, when the Academy Awards happen, why are we dragging people away from the podium? The reason that we're dragging these extraordinarily successful people from the podium is because they have to thank everybody who helped get them to that podium. And I've discovered this is the single most important skill of success. In the Industrial Revolution, we were punished if we asked for help. We fostered this notion that there's something wrong with you if you ask for help while you're more dependent than ever on one job. But the most successful people are the people that are truly successful, self-made billionaires. When you examine them, they have an extraordinary gift in getting people to support them, to back them, to finding the right kind of talent, to help them out, get the right mentors, get the right teachers. And what we found in our programs is most people respond when they hear this for the first time, build effective support, that sounds good, what is it? And in the 25 years I've been delivering this work, I find that most people who don't pursue what they were born to do, who don't pursue what they want to do, on some fundamental level, they believe they will not get the help to make it happen. But once we define what we want to do with our lives, Our success is purely based on the quality of help that we get. We had a group of Disney executives a couple of years ago come through the Inspired Work program together. They'd heard about it through the leadership program, and that following week, they printed up 20 t-shirts that they all wore to work that said, "Help me." And that is how my business has grown. Much of the work that I do with clients today is, they handle the heavy lifting in the 2 days they come to the program. But the real work is about building that community around them so that they become wildly successful. And that's how it works. My work, I found at one of the biggest catastrophes of my life. I worked in a job that I disliked for 12 years. I was a staffing executive. I learned a great deal about work, but the only reason that I did it was I wanted to live in Malibu until I got a record contract. And in 1990, I did. And 6 weeks into our project, my producer dropped out of a heart attack. We were the same age. He was in his 30s. And in that one moment, I realized that I'd been putting my happiness off into the future for a long time. And what I find today, we just had our 25th anniversary, is I get all these letters from people telling me how their lives are today. And that's the life that I lead today. I'd like to hear from all of you. Any questions that you'd like to ask before we complete?
David,
Yes.
by the way, I'm channeling Emily right now, and she's really proud of the work you're doing. But, David, all of this is about changing your job. What about changing within the job? Because I found in my work, I've had to reinvent myself in the same field a number of times. Do you have comments to make about that?
Thank you. The real point, and Michael, what I thought I heard is that I'm talking about jobs, and I'm not talking about jobs. I'm talking about business owners. I'm talking about people that have jobs, professionals like doctors or attorneys, budding entrepreneurs, ministers. All of us are confronted by change every day, and like manufacturing. I recently wrote an article that went viral, and it opened with, picture this. You've been working so hard on that job to get the promotion. The one thing you most want is a new BMW convertible. It happens. So you go to the BMW website and you customize your convertible. You hit click, and the dealer down the street prints out your new car. A lot of people are poo-pooing 3D printing when Northrop is actually building fighter jets with 3D printers. So, we see bigger and bigger tidal waves coming through every field that we're in. And the successful professional doesn't run away from the change. He or she leads it. So when you talk about being in the same business, you have to reinvent yourself today over and over again to not only stay competitive, but to stay interesting, to stay interested. And when that happens, we still go through all the same issues that I described before. It doesn't matter where you're sitting, what you're doing. We were talking, some of us before the meeting, that baby boomers are retiring at the rate of 14,000 people a day, and this is going to continue for another 10 years. And baby boomers do not want to retire. Most of them want to do something different. Rewire. Like our friend. And I'm so excited Mel Spies is speaking to you next month. Mel is a client. Kim and I conspired to change his life. He was the commander of Camp Pendleton for 16 years and launching his new company that I've had the privilege to work with them on called Leaders Can Be Made. And when I got past my bias of, military and looked at what he was actually teaching, my jaw dropped to the floor. because what the U.S. Marines have been doing more brilliantly than any other organization in the world, and this is recognized by Forbes, McKinsey, they take ordinary people and turn them into leaders. So his message to you is going to be remarkable. Is that helpful? Another question? Yes?
I'll broadcast louder. I kind of look for the easy approach to solving any problem, and I think, especially here in Newport Beach, anybody that has a problem, they take a new drug. Supposedly different drugs can make you love more, make you see God. Is there anything in the chemical world that could make us happier with change or reduce fear? Okay, so we got to do it the hard way.
Actually, amongst employers today, the drug thing has turned into a really big issue because America consumes over 80% of the hard drugs in this world, but they also consume over 80% of the pharmaceuticals. And so we become a country that does not want to feel. Over here.
Hi. What about inner work? Some people have had really tough childhoods, and that affects how they look at everything. This is a wonderful process, but still people can have some things that block them from much earlier in their lives.
First, I'll respond on a personal level. I came from a really difficult childhood. I came from a Seventh-day Adventist family with a doctor who lived out in the desert, who beat his kids every day, and I escaped by becoming a concert pianist. At some point, I had to make a decision whether that was going to be my story or if I was going to start creating a better one. Okay, so that's just my personal take with it. It is an inner job, but what I keep finding with people, it's more than that. It's an inside job and an outside job. Okay? And I find it's kind of lockstep how we work on it. The inner work has to be done. You know, we teach people how to shift the way they talk to themselves, because when someone gets frightened, that's one of the most magic moments of whether or not they're going to move forward, because if they are unhealthy, they'll say something dreadful to themselves. Okay? And that can be changed. It's there. One quick one? One quick one.
What about the spiritual component? Obviously, I've talked to many people in the 12-step program, and if they cannot take that one spiritual step, the rest of it doesn't work for them. Is this interwoven in there, or the self-talk, I would think, would be a large spiritual component, but you haven't mentioned it.
The question is, what's the spiritual aspect of this change process and of work, right? It's always part of it. It's always part of it. I find that a lot of change programs deal on such a logical level that people never get it. And, right? I've been to so many programs where it's all thinking, and I'm going, they're going to be sitting in this room thinking about it until they're obsolete. To put it like this, for real authentic change to take place, it has to be logical. Critical thinking has to be part of this step. Critical thinking, Marcia Sinitar wrote my least favorite career book, Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. I've never seen that happen. I believe what Andy Warhol said, do what you love, you can always sell it. That is logical. The emotions have to be in it. If we don't capture people's hearts, if we aren't coming from our own heart, we're not going to impact other hearts. Okay? And the spiritual piece always is there. But the way that we do it at Inspired Work, one of the people that I met through the Inside Edge was Michael Beckwith at Agape. And one day I was walking out of Agape. He'd interviewed for me several times, and he grabbed my hand and he said, there's so many people in Agape that have come through your programs and they come back with different lives. And he said, what what are you doing there? And I said, well, actually, we're doing very much what you're doing with people's spirituality, but we don't use any of your words. So we've managed to come up with making total room for a person's spirituality in any form that they want to use it, but we don't come from that because we want everybody to get it. Everybody, thank you so much for having me today.